This story is titled, "My Dad Called Me Emotionally Fragile After I Asked Why My Wedding Fund Was Empty." Turns out he bought a jet ski. For my stepbrother, now they're trying to invite me to their new family bonding trip. I sent them the invoice for therapy instead. Let me introduce my family in the most efficient way possible. If emotional manipulation were an Olympic sport, my dad Banks, 62M, would have brought home gold before I was even out of diapers. My stepmom Irene, 58F, has two moods: wine-drunk nostalgia and pretending she doesn't hear the screaming. And then there's Alan, 27M, my stepbrother, the prodigal son, the chosen one, the guy who got a brand new truck at 18 just because he deserved it, while I was still paying my own way through community college with a job at CVS and dreams of not losing my mind. I'm Salvador, 28M, the emotionally fragile disappointment. At least, according to Banks, who once told me, and I quote, "You'd be a lot easier to love if you weren't so sensitive all the time." I should have seen it coming, honestly. The betrayal, the jet ski, the absolute mental breakdown I had in my parked car while holding the empty wedding fund statement in one hand and a very sharp Chipotle fork in the other. But we'll get there. Growing up with Banks as a father was like being raised inside a motivational poster created by someone who absolutely hates you. Everything was a test. Praise was rationed like water in a desert. And emotions? Weakness. Unless you were Alan. In which case, crying at your college graduation because the speech was really moving was somehow noble and not, fragile. I spent most of my 20s playing the role of family afterthought. I kept my head down, saved money like a paranoid squirrel, and worked 2 jobs so I could actually afford to propose to my girlfriend without going into debt. That wedding fund was the one thing that felt sacred. My own little rebellion. Every time I made a deposit into that account, it felt like flipping off the universe. Like, hey, I might be the disappointment, but at least I'm not asking my parents for handouts. But apparently Alan was. And the universe? It clapped back. The first crack in the dam came 2 months ago when my fiancé and I sat down to start planning venues. I logged into the joint savings account and saw the balance sitting at a clean $46.71. I refreshed the page 3 times, assuming it was some kind of banking glitch. Maybe Wells Fargo had been hacked by particularly cruel pranksters. Then I checked the withdrawal history. 3 massive transfers, all labeled as family investments. The kind of vague description you use when you don't want anyone asking questions because the real answer is something profoundly stupid, like buying a secondhand Sea-Doo for your golden boy during a midlife crisis disguised as bonding time. That night, I drove to my parents' place, still hoping, stupidly, naively, for some kind of logical explanation. Banks was in the backyard, shirtless and red-faced, hosing down a literal jet ski sitting on a trailer hitched to Alan's truck. Irene was pouring sangria into a novelty goblet shaped like a flamingo. And when I asked about the money, Banks didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just sighed like I was the burden and muttered, "God, you're so emotionally fragile, Sal." It was just a little redistribution. A little redistribution. I left before I could commit arson. But trust me, I didn't forget. And I didn't forgive. I started planning. The thing about betrayal is that it's never just about the one thing. Sure, the wedding fund was the kill shot, but let's not pretend it came out of nowhere. My whole life has been a collection of minor emotional bruises that Banks and Irene called parenting and Alan called normal. And maybe I would have swallowed this latest one too, buried it under my usual just let it go programming, if it weren't for what came next. So after that backyard scene, jet ski gleaming in the sunlight like a $9,000 slap to the face, I ghosted them for a couple weeks. Didn't answer texts, didn't return calls. Figured maybe they'd reflect. Maybe Irene would do that thing where she tries to smooth it all over with a sad casserole and a weak apology that starts with "your father meant well." Instead, I got an email. Subject line, "Family Bonding Retreat. Mandatory RSVP." Inside, a 5-paragraph pitch from Irene about how they were planning a healing weekend at some lake cabin they rented through VRBO. No joke, she actually wrote, "This family has lost its way, and we need to restore unity through structured recreation." Structured recreation. At the bottom of the email was an itinerary. Group hikes, trust falls, s'mores with something called a sharing circle. And in the margin, in bright red text, Alan had scrawled, "Gonna rip it on the jet ski, bro." Let me pause and make this very clear. They emptied my wedding fund, bought Alan a jet ski, and then had the Olympic-level audacity to invite me to ride it with them under the banner of family healing. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from banks that started with, "Look, if you're going to sulk about every little decision your family makes without you, maybe you're not mature enough to get married." And ended with, "Besides, you never even confirmed that fund was only for your wedding." I sat in my car for 45 minutes after hearing that, just listening to it on loop, picking apart every word. Like maybe if I replayed it enough times, it would somehow become less unhinged. Spoiler, it didn't. This is the part where I admit something shameful. I almost caved. Not because I believed him. No, I've been fluent in Banks logic since I was old enough to dodge a passive-aggressive insult. But because there's a part of me, deep and broken, that still wants him to look at me the way he looks at Alan. Like I matter. So yeah, I cracked for a second. I even Googled how much does a used jet ski sell for. Like maybe if I could prove it was worth less than what I'd saved, it would mean something. That the betrayal wasn't that bad. That I wasn't crazy. But then Irene called. And this is what she said: "Swear on everything. Don't let your feelings ruin this trip for everyone else." My feelings. The ones I apparently weaponized by daring to be upset my life savings were liquidated for a man who once stole my Halloween candy and blamed it on squirrels. That was the moment something in me snapped. Like, not dramatically. I didn't throw a chair or scream into a void. But I felt it. A quiet click in my brain that said, no more explaining. No more forgiving. No more fucking family trips. Asterisk. And that's when I opened Excel and started building a little spreadsheet. Not for a wedding. Not anymore. This one was labeled reparations. After the feelings phone call, and yes, I did label it that in my mental archive of family absurdity, I stopped trying to make sense of anything. You ever hit a point where you're so emotionally fried that you just run diagnostics on your own life like it's a broken computer? That's what happened. I pulled out the dusty old laptop I used back when I was doing freelance work, the one with the cracked screen and missing T key, and I started going through bank statements. Every deposit, every transfer, every line item with the words family, trip, or investment tagged next to it. I built a timeline of betrayals so airtight it could qualify for court evidence. I even color-coded it, because apparently revenge turns me into a very bitter librarian. I calculated exactly how much I'd put into the wedding fund since opening it at 24, $18,462.71. I know because I screenshotted every direct deposit and saved them to a new folder called Robbery. Then I found it. June 14th, $8,200 transferred to Alan J. Simmons. Memo line. Fund. They didn't even try to hide it. They used the damn jet ski emoji like this was a birthday Venmo, not the equivalent of robbing their own son with a smile. At this point, my fiancée, Emma, was still under the impression that my silence toward my family was just wedding stress. I hadn't told her yet, partly because I didn't want to make it real, and partly because I knew once I did, I wouldn't be able to go back. Telling someone means you're admitting it happened. And once she knew, she'd never let it go. And I didn't want her to hate them the way I did. But then one night, she came into the living room while I was staring at the laptop, surrounded by a graveyard of energy drink cans and passive-aggressive budgeting apps, and she said, "Hey babe, your dad just texted me. What's this about a lake trip?" I looked up, blinked, didn't answer right away. She showed me the screen. Banks, in all his delusional glory, had messaged her personally. "Hope you're excited for the family lake weekend. Can't wait to get some bonding time before the big day. Bring your swimsuit." Swimsuit. For the trip, they funded with our wedding money. I told her everything. And I mean everything. From the day I started saving to the exact timestamp of the transfer that funded Alan's aquatic Dutchmobile. I showed her the email from Irene, the voicemail from Banks, and even the receipt for the therapy intake session I had booked but never gone to, which, by the way, I added to my reparations spreadsheet. Emma went pale, then red, then nuclear. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat there, nodded, and said, "Cool. So we're burning it all down, right?" Reader, I have never loved that woman more. We didn't say another word for about an hour. Just started planning. Not the wedding. Not anymore. The invoice. So, naturally, we RSVP'd. To the lake trip, I mean. Irene sent one of those painfully cheery follow-ups. "Still haven't heard from you, Sal. We need a head count for the groceries." And I replied with the calm detachment of someone planning an emotional war crime. "Count us in. Can't wait for some family bonding." Emma and I packed our bags with military precision. Sunscreen, Advil, an air mattress, 3 matching outfits for photos I had zero intention of being in, and one very special item, a manila envelope labeled invoice. Inside? A full-color, stapled packet titled, Therapy Cost Plus Stolen Dreams, a Financial Retrospective. Page 1. A breakdown of my contributions to the wedding fund, with bank logos, date stamps, and notations like meal skip deposit number 4. Page 2. The now infamous $8,200 fund transfer to Alan. Page 3. A psychological therapy rate chart from a local clinic with the note, due to financial theft and gaslighting-induced trauma, please remit payment to the emotionally fragile party, me, at your earliest convenience. Page 4. A Venmo QR code. Yes, I went full petty. We got to the lake house Friday evening. Alan greeted us shirtless, holding a solo cup and yelling something about Jaeger bombs like a man still mentally trapped in 2011. The jet ski was parked front and center like some grotesque totem of entitlement. Banks came out onto the porch and gave me this performative hug like he hadn't gutted my future like a trout. Glad you came, son, he said, clapping me on the back with all the warmth of a tax audit. I smiled. I said nothing. Dinner that night was burgers, cheap beer, and forced small talk. Irene kept doing this thing where she looked between me and Alan like we were two toddlers she was trying to get to share crayons. At one point, she said, I just think this weekend is about healing. Right, boys? And Alan, with a mouthful of potato salad, said, let it go, dude. It's not like you were going to have a real wedding anyway. That's when I stood up. I didn't yell, didn't throw my plate. I just reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and gently slid it across the table to Banks. What's this? He said, already annoyed. An invoice, I replied, for services rendered in dreams destroyed. He laughed. Of course he did. The kind of fake, dismissive laugh that means I still think I'm in control here. But then he opened it and saw that it wasn't just some crayon-scrawled list of complaints. It was evidence. A financial paper trail. A legally formatted itemization of betrayal. Irene went pale. Alan scoffed, called me dramatic. But I kept going. I read the total out loud. $18,462.71, plus a $125 late fee for every week it went unpaid. Then I looked directly at Banks and said, if you're going to replace my wedding with a jet ski, the least you can do is pay for the therapy I'll need to process being robbed by my own father. Silence. Emma just sipped her drink like it was the best show she'd seen all year. Eventually, Banks slammed the folder shut and said, this is ridiculous. And I said, no. What's ridiculous is stealing from your own kid and expecting a S more to make it better. Then we left. Didn't pack. Didn't explain. Just walked off into the night, got in the car, and left the jet ski bobbing in the lake like the $8,000 midlife crisis it was. We didn't talk much on the drive home. Emma just reached over at one point, squeezed my hand, and said, you know we can still get married in Vegas, right? God, I love that woman. By the time we pulled into our apartment, I had 22 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and a text from Irene that just said, this isn't how families solve problems. Which is rich coming from someone who watched her stepson's wedding fund get embezzled for lake toys and called it a redistribution. I didn't respond. That night, Emma ordered Thai food, poured us both oversized glasses of wine, and we sat on the couch watching reality TV while my phone buzzed like a mosquito with a cocaine habit. Alan had texted too. You're seriously blowing this way out of proportion, LMAO, followed 10 minutes later by, if you don't chill, Dad's gonna cut you off completely. Cut me off from what, exactly? Emotional neglect and passive-aggressive birthday cards? The best one, though, came from Banks around 11:47 p.m. A voicemail I've now listened to 6 times, not because I needed clarification, I just wanted to study the art of a man unraveling in real time. He started with, I don't know what kind of stunt you think you pulled tonight, then pivoted to, you're lucky I even let you live here all those years, then this entitlement is why no one takes you seriously, and ended, my personal favorite, with, nobody ever gave me anything either, but you don't see me crying about it. Sir, you are 62 and bought your stepson a jet ski with someone else's wedding money. Let's not pretend you're out here bootstrapping your way through life. The next morning, I woke up to Emma standing over me with coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She had that look. The I'm about to do something chaotic but justified look. So, she said, remember how you told me to let it go and take the high road? I blinked. Yeah, cool. I did the opposite. She had taken a picture of the invoice packet before we handed it over. Then, and I genuinely don't know how she thought of this, she posted a photo to Instagram. Just the cover page of the invoice, artfully lit next to her engagement ring and a glass of wine. Caption: when your future father-in-law steals your wedding fund to buy a jet ski for his golden child and calls you emotionally fragile, you send him an invoice for the therapy. Hashtag self-care, hashtag emotional interest rates, hashtag family values. blew up. She didn't tag anyone, but it didn't matter. Her followers, and mine, and friends of friends all started sharing it. The comments ranged from "girl what" to "please sell this as a Hallmark movie but make it petty" to my personal favorite: "nothing says you're dead to me like a stapled invoice with a QR code." I didn't even know Emma had a TikTok, but apparently she stitched the post into a 30-second breakdown of wedding fund fraud, and that thing got 400,000 views in a day. Banks hasn't called since. Irene sent a long, hand-wringing email about how we've hurt the family by airing private issues, to which I replied with one line: "Then maybe don't commit financial theft so publicly." Alan's latest message simply read: "People at work are asking questions. Thanks a lot." I heart reacted it. Nothing else. But the best part? My Venmo. You know the QR code we stuck on the invoice? Strangers are sending me therapy money. So far, I've received $382 from absolute legends who just wanted to contribute to what one of them called the petty fund. And Emma and I? We're shopping for rings again. But this time, we're doing it on our terms. So here's the thing about watching your family implode online. It's weirdly cathartic. Watching the numbers tick up on Emma's TikTok while sipping coffee in my pajamas, reading comments like "emotionally fragile icon energy" and "I would pay for this therapy invoice" merch felt healing. And then I remembered that revenge feels best when it's also tax deductible. Let me introduce you to Nicole. Nicole is my coworker. Nicole is also a divorce paralegal who, when she saw the TikTok, texted me. You realize what they did might technically be financial misrepresentation, right? Cue me blinking at my phone like a dog hearing the word walk. Now, I'm not the suing type. I spent most of my adult life just surviving, not fighting. But Banks changed the rules when he pulled the rug out from under my wedding and used it to cushion Alan's jet ski trailer. So I met up with Nicole over tacos and rage venting, and she walked me through something called a constructive trust. Apparently, and I'm paraphrasing heavily here, if someone uses money held in good faith for a specific purpose and spends it on something completely unrelated, you can file a civil claim. Especially if you can prove the money came from you and was never gifted. Which I can. Because guess who kept every pay stub and deposit receipt since 2021? This emotionally fragile dumbass right here. It gets better. Nicole says that even if we don't go full lawsuit, I can still file a demand letter. Basically, it "give me my money back before I take your ass to court" letter, but dressed in legal tone. Like, "We regret to inform you that you're about to have a really bad month." Emma and I spent the weekend drafting it. The final version, printed on thick, intimidating legal paper, included a breakdown of every dollar I deposited into the wedding fund, a detailed timeline of the unauthorized withdrawals, complete with bank documentation, a section titled "Unjust Enrichment by a Personal Watercraft," and finally, a clause stating that if I didn't receive reimbursement of $18,462.71 within 14 days, I would proceed with filing a claim in small claims court. We mailed it certified. And yes, I included the QR code again, because healing isn't linear, but petty can be. Then we waited. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from Banks that started with, "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family." Which is wild, considering he's the one who committed felony-level entitlement and expected a group hug after. The next morning, my bank notified me of a transfer. $5,000. From Irene. No message. No memo. Just $5,000 in blood money sent to my account like a mob payoff. Emma and I stared at it for a while. I briefly considered Venmoing it back with a note that said, "This doesn't even cover Alan's trailer hitch," but Nicole advised I sit tight and let them sweat. 4 days later, another $7,000. Then silence. Then, on day 13, 1 day before the deadline, a final transfer, $6,462.71. Exactly the amount remaining. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence and digital regret. And you know what? That was better than any sorry could have ever been. Because it wasn't a gift. It was surrender. So you'd think after sending me nearly 20 grand in quiet installments, my parents, sorry, Banks and Irene, would maybe, just maybe, take the L with grace and dignity. They did not. Instead, they pivoted. Hard. Suddenly, I was getting group texts again. "We're so glad this brought us closer." Alan sent me a video of him doing donuts on the jet ski with the caption, "All water under the bridge, bro, call me hand." Bro. I didn't respond. But I was still watching. Because that's the thing about people like them. They're not sorry. They're scared. And when they sense they've lost control, they scramble for whatever illusion of power they can still hold. So when I got the invite to Irene's upcoming birthday party, just a small family affair, I knew exactly what it was. A PR stunt. A rebranding opportunity. A chance to rewrite the narrative and pretend the last few weeks never happened. But I had other plans. Emma and I RSVP'd yes. We showed up looking like wealth and vengeance, her in this navy dress that made Irene blink 3 times, me in the one blazer I own, holding a sleek black USB drive like it contained national security footage. Because it kind of did. See, I'd made a little video. Just a fun slideshow for Irene's birthday. You know, classic stuff. Family photos, a few sweet messages, maybe some pictures of her beloved lake house. Except I snuck in a few extras. Slide 1. Happy birthday, Irene. Party popper. Slide 2. A sweet pic of her and Banks at their anniversary dinner. Slide 3. Alan posing with the jet ski. Slide 4. The invoice. Full screen. Centered. Watermarked with paid in full. Slide 5. A screenshot of Banks' emotionally fragile voicemail transcript, auto-captioned like a TED Talk. Slide 6. My favorite. A pie chart titled, Wedding Fund Allocation, Expectations versus Reality, with 2 slices, one labeled, Wedding 0%, and the other, Jet Ski 100%. Slide 7. A quote from Banks, typed in Comic Sans for maximum disrespect, if you're not mature enough to handle family decisions. Slide 8. A QR code. Again, the whole room went dead silent when it started playing. Alan coughed. Irene dropped her mimosa. Someone, I think my great-aunt, whispered, "What's a QR code?" And Emma? She just sat back, crossed her legs, and said, "Oh, this part's my favorite." When it ended, I stood up and raised my glass. To Irene, I said, "May this be the last year you mistake silence for respect." We left before dessert. Outside, I got a text from Banks. "You just humiliated your whole family." I didn't reply. I just sent back the pie chart. We didn't get married in a cathedral or a ballroom or one of those Pinterest barns with twinkle lights and overpriced hay bales. We got married in a tiny art gallery downtown, standing between 2 abstract paintings and a sculpture that looked like an angry duck, because the space was cheap, beautiful, and more importantly, ours. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. No speeches. No forced family hugs. No white-knuckle toasts from someone trying to pretend we were all okay. Just me, Emma, 2 of our closest friends, and a judge named Sheila who wore glitter eyeliner and called us badasses after the vows. It was perfect. Irene wasn't invited. Banks didn't get the location. Alan? I think he was in Cabo that week. According to the passive-aggressive jet ski boomerangs he posted on Instagram like a man desperately trying to drown his shame in margaritas. But you know who did send a gift? 2 weeks before the wedding, a little envelope showed up in our mailbox. No return address, just our names written in weirdly formal cursive that immediately screamed, Irene. Inside, a Hallmark wedding card with $100 in cash, a typed message, typed, and a passive-aggressive masterpiece of a note. We hope this token helps in some small way. Wishing you peace and maturity in your new chapter. Love, the family. I almost cried laughing. Emma framed it. It now hangs in our bathroom above the toilet. We call it the exhibit of dignity. And that $100? We spent it on 2 things. A round of overpriced cocktails at the bar where we had our first date, and a novelty bath mat that says emotionally fragile but financially compensated. But here's the real ending. Last week, we got our wedding photos back. In one of them, I'm laughing so hard I look borderline unwell. Emma's got frosting on her nose. There's no centerpieces, no chandelier, no family photo with forced smiles. Just us and joy. Real joy. Not the kind you manufacture to keep the peace. The kind you build when you finally stop begging people to love you right and start loving yourself enough to walk away. We made our own version of family that day. And honestly, it's the only RSVP that ever really mattered.